A 47-year-old lady is brought to my clinic in a critical condition. She was bleeding to death. She had continuous bleeding in her uterus. She was obese, she was diabetic, her diabetes was out of control, and to top it all, she had undergone a heart surgery just 2 months back. She was almost bleeding to death. She was a high risk for surgery, she was high risk for anesthesia. Now, we told her husband that she will have to be taken for surgery anyway. He said, I have been told that my wife cannot tolerate anesthesia for more than 45 minutes. And this surgery, you're talking about, takes 2 to 3 hours. Other doctors have given up on her, saying that doing the surgery is a high risk, not doing the surgery is a high risk. It's a high risk any which way. We told her, don't worry, we told him not to worry. I said we will be employing a new technique of surgery which is possible to do in just 30 minutes instead of the traditional 2 to 3 hours. She was taken to the operation theatre, our team was ready, and the surgery was done successfully, and it took only 20 minutes. It took only 20 minutes, she was safe, she recovered, she was happy, and she thought she underwent a miracle surgery because her problem was solved. Now, I'm going to talk to you about this surgery called stitchless surgery, which we regularly do. It is called a stitchless surgery because it spares the woman of a cut or stitches on the abdomen. Many surgeons have contributed to it, and it is stitchless, painless, bloodless, and the patient can go home in 24 hours. Now, I'm not going to talk to you about the various steps of this surgery because this is not the platform for it, but I'm going to talk to you about the story behind it, how this surgery, this technique was born, how this new route was discovered. I was just 9 years old when I was sent to a military school called Sainik School, Balachadi. I say I was sent because I was so much attached to my mom that I used to clutch the pallu of her sari and go wherever she went. And my father thought that this guy must be sent to a boarding school, a public school, where he can learn to face the realities, the harsh realities of life. Now there was a change of scene from the cozy, comfortable company of my mom to the harsh and no-nonsense realities of the army discipline away from home, and that too 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and for 7 long years. I somehow transformed myself towards the environment. But I could hardly believe that this flexibility, the making myself available to transformation, would pave the way to things to come in the long run. I want to thank my father for this first early lesson. I started topping in the class, I started winning the debates, and I started winning quiz competitions. I became famous in the school, and that soothed my stay in the school. But during my stay, I had questions and questions and questions. But I developed the courage to ask questions to my teachers. I asked questions to my seniors, and I also asked questions to my classmates, even at the risk of appearing foolish, even at the risk of appearing stupid. Because I learned that it is all right to appear stupid for a minute than to remain one for a lifetime. So it was my biology teacher who taught me the 4 steps you mentioned, the 4 steps of inventing. The first one is to propose a hypothesis, the second is to gather all information around it, the third is to experiment, and the fourth is to draw conclusions. And while repeating all these steps, he used to look at me. Actually, he looked at everyone, but I thought he saw something in me and said, this guy is going to invent or discover something. I was good at drawing and sketching, and that helped me better understand human anatomy. I drew sketches of Leonardo da Vinci, Vasco da Gama, Alfred Nobel, among others. They inspired me. In the assembly speeches we were asked to deliver in turns, I chose to speak on Alfred Nobel. I read about his biography and I spoke on how he made riches by selling his discovery of dynamite, later repented, and then institute the Nobel Prizes. In 2016, me and my wife, we visited Sweden. We went to the Golden Hall in Stockholm, where Nobel Prizes are given every year. Now, Vasco da Gama discovered a new route from Europe to India in 1498, and I was to contribute in discovering a new route for some women, some surgeries on women. And this was the route of vagina. This was the route of the natural birth passage. Now, while I was to do these surgeries, I was still in the school when I always dreamt of, actually, in the school I dreamt of becoming the General Secretary, the Secretary General of the United Nations. Then I dreamt of becoming an astronaut, and then I desired to join the Indian Armed Forces. It was one of my teachers, Mr. Pradhan, who predicted, Mukesh, you will become a doctor. He was the one who encouraged me when I miserably failed in public speaking in my early life. Then there was Mr. Robert Knight. He was a teacher from England, and he was funny. He used to teach us science. He would bring funny things to the classroom, and he would teach us how wind will help in motion and so many things. And he would say, observe, observe, observe. And the biggest thing, the biggest lesson I got from him was the power of observation. I did not play much sports, but I used to observe how a game of football or a game of basketball can be won. And the answer I got was there and then. It was teamwork. The foundation of building a great, effective team for me was laid on the football grounds of Balachari. So this is what I have always found. Now, I went to the college then, and when I went to the college, I became a big sensation there because of my speaking abilities. I started winning all debates. I started conducting all ceremonies on the stage like you were doing, and I became kind of a hero in the college. But I realized that this was but temporary. I soon realized that this was not going to last for long. When I was asked what would you like to become after your MBBS, my answer was simple. I wanted to become a neurophysician. I wanted to become a neurophysician because the connections to the brain and the connection to the nerves were complicated and challenging. So I thought I should become a neurophysician. But something happened, and I chose gynecology. And at that time, and look at how God helps us shape our destiny. It was for the first time that postgraduate seats opened up in the Cancer Institute within the campus. So I was to become the first ever resident to be trained formally in gynec cancer surgery. I was to be trained by a US trained teacher. I was to be trained later by faculty who came from Germany, from Australia, from England, and from the USA. But the biggest difference in my life made in that institute came by the infinite freedom that the institute gave. You could suggest changes, you could modify the treatment protocols, you could use new instruments, and so on. During my final MBBS days, there was a big insight I got, and that insight was brought up by a teacher called Dr. V.G. Mavlankar, a famous surgeon in those days. We were waiting as a batch in the ward. We were waiting for a senior resident doctor who would teach us surgical instruments from an exam point of view. So he would come, he would show us the various instruments, and he would say, 5 uses of this instrument, 7 uses of this instrument, and so on. So we'll remember it for the exam. He did not come for a long time. We were about to leave. That's when Dr. Mavlankar entered. And he said, what were you waiting for? We said surgical instruments. And the senior doctor, he said, no, I have sent him for an emergency surgery, so I will be teaching you the surgical instruments. Now, our batch was sure that a unit chief cannot teach us a surgical instruments from an exam point of view. And we were right. He picked up instruments and he started asking funny questions. He said, Mukesh, this is the needle holder, this is the artery forceps. Give me the differences. I said a needle holder is used to hold a needle and an artery forceps is used to hold a tissue. What is the big deal about it? He said, no. And what was going to happen then was a big insight for me. It was a huge insight for me. He smiled and he said, no, that is not what I'm asking. He said, look at the joints of these instruments. A needle holder's joint is close to its end. and an artery forceps joint is in the middle. They work differently, so they are designed differently. And oh my God, I had never seen the surgical instruments from this point of view, from this perspective. What I got was that if you change your perspective, it changes your vision. My daughter, she is in the United States, she's Dr. Rini, and she's a dentist in Texas. She said, Daddy, don't forget to tell the audience about the cardboard box you made for me, the cardboard periscope you made for me. She said, don't forget to tell the audience that you used to use a cardboard box as a dummy abdomen to learn the laparoscopic surgeries at home. So these are the things that we tried and do. In 1994 it was a big twist in our life, a big turn in our life. This is when me and my wife, we went to a world conference on gynec surgery. Now we went to this gynec surgery conference. That is where a German doctor called Dr. Kurt Zem, he presented a new technique of gynecologic surgery. I didn't find it very appealing, and it lost popularity with other gynecologists as well. But what I learned was that it is all right to discover new things, to discover new methods, and present them before your peers. Later that day, there was a debate on a new technique called LAVH. It is called a laparoscopy-assisted vaginal hysterectomy. Now, this LAVH for all of you is like there are some steps carried out with laparoscope and the uterus is finally removed from the birth passage. During the debate, I got up and I said, it seems to me that laparoscopy assistance is not required in most of these surgeries. Then why invest on time and money and learning curve on these expensive instruments? There was a big heated debate and people started talking this and that, and I was quietly, very silently listening to them. There's one doctor who got up and he said, Doctor, it is easy for you to say laparoscopy assistance is not required. I challenge you. You do 10 cases without laparoscopy assistance, come back and talk to us. So my wife said, why don't you answer this? So I got up and in a very low but firm tone, I said, I will. I said, that you are right, there is no point in debating to no end. I'll go back, do what I said, and I'll let my work speak. So this is what I did. We went back home, we wrote down the steps, and we did some drawings, and we started doing these surgeries with a new technique. To start with, we took simple cases, and later we did some difficult and challenging cases. The prime concern in our minds while doing this new technique was the safety of the patients, and only later the successful outcome of these surgeries. We did some hundreds of surgeries, and by that time, I had forgotten the name of the person who had challenged what I said. But I thanked him in my heart because a new surgery was born, a new route was discovered, and a revolution was dawning. My debating skills were put to rest and my surgical skills had taken over. So we kept on doing this kind of work and we kept on doing and doing. And later, we are very happy that we have done these works. We are happy that these techniques have been useful for obese patients. We are happy that they are useful for the diabetic patients. We are happy that they are being used for the people with heart problems, but that it doesn't end there. Our technique is useful also for the average woman who needs hysterectomy, who needs removal of the uterus. After this technique, we devised 3 more surgeries which are called stitchless surgeries, and one of which I proudly named as Vidula's operation after my wife, who has herself been a gynecologist, but she has assisted me all surgeries with unparalleled enthusiasm and passion. So I just want to thank you for being around. And while we bask in the glory of having devised so many surgeries, while we bask in the glory of having done more than 15,000 such surgeries, I am fully aware that the work doesn't stop here. I am fully aware that more needs to be done by more teams. Thank you so much.